Welcome to another episode of What is Black. The inspiration for this episode came from a Google search where I found a February 2021 Nielsen report, The New Black Family Culture, Navigating Crises Through Content. The highlight was this quote from the opening of the report. Television and the content we Black families choose continues to play an essential role, helping Black families cope under unprecedented pressures. This is evidenced by the fact that Black families are accessing more content than ever, especially leaning into programming where they can feel seen. This idea of representative media content for Black families appealed to me as I'm in this space creating content, and I wanted to explore this topic with experts in their fields. I'm excited today to be joined for this episode by special guest Charlene Polite Corley, the Vice President of Diverse Insights and Partnerships at Nielsen, and Natalie Engel, the Director of Content for Children's Programming at PBS. This episode will explore why representation in the media for Black families matters. So welcome, Charlene and Natalie, to the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's a pleasure to speak with you today. So first, I'm going to start by just asking, how are you all feeling today?
Feeling all right. Thanks. Yeah, it's a little chillier today than I expected, so I'm just kind of recalibrating on that. But otherwise, feeling pretty good.
Same here in the Maryland area where I live. We actually got some snow flurries this morning, so I'm just embracing sort of the holiday spirit and trying to find something positive in the cold weather.
Awesome.
I agree. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So in the intro, I talked a little bit about why, what was the inspiration for this episode. And so I'm going to start by asking some questions of you both so we can start the conversation. So Charlene, before we get started, can you just share a little bit about your background? And then I'll ask Natalie and then we'll get into the questions.
Sure, thanks. Well, my role at Nielsen is diverse insights and partnerships. And really what that means is I'm on our diversity, equity, inclusion team. And my job is to bring that lens into everything that Nielsen measures and reports. So, Nielsen is on a mission to create a better media future for all people. And we can't do that if we're not including all perspectives and all different kinds of intersectional diversity. Given the population trends and shifts across our country, it's increasingly important and critical for our clients and the media industry at large to understand, who is the new face of our country today and going forward. And a lot of our clients are really in the infancy of understanding those different dimensions of diversity. And we have the insights that can help really illuminate that, because not only is it the right thing to do, it is critical to the survival of your business. And so with populations changing and media behaviors definitely changing, part of the work of our team is to really bring that all together and say, let us guide you, not just with our currency measurement and ratings and all of that, but also as a guidepost to progress as we break down I think systemic barriers or try to pull in now perspectives and folks that have been historically excluded. So that's a long-winded answer about what I do.
Oh, you're doing great stuff. All right. And Natalie, you can share a little bit on what you do.
Sure. So my role at PBS is the Senior Director of Development for PBS Kids content. So what that means is that I work with a lot of creative people, a lot of producers, and a lot of just individuals, anyone who has an idea for a television show for our audience, which is children between the ages of 2 and 8 at PBS. I work with them on really understanding what it is that they want to say, on figuring out, who these characters are, what their adventures are, what kinds of stories these characters can tell. And I help refine that idea. And I also just help creators kind of navigate the process of getting a show made for PBS Kids.
Awesome. So I wanted to just follow up with Charlene about the work that you're doing to address diversity, equity, and inclusion, and specifically, focusing on the Nielsen report that came out earlier this year, the new Black family culture navigating crisis through content, and some other reports that you all do. And I was wondering if you could share anything that you really found. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that report, just in brief. And then, was there any data or anything surprising that made you think differently after that report?
Absolutely. Yeah. The last year and a half, almost 2 years, right, have just added complexity to already challenging sort of day to day as working parents or just people, trying to make it through the day. But between the pandemic and the racial reckoning, it was really important for me and for our team to use our data to kind of do a status report on how Black families were coping, and specifically how they were using content to help cope, to help start a really tough conversation, on what was happening, to help just like have a break from what was happening, and all the other ways that we kind of turn to, in particular, television content, to get through this new normal of, virtual school, working from home, all of the above, all at the same time. So one of the, like I said, big things that really kind of came together for Black families in the US and really around the world as we coped was, there's this very real threat of how do I cope now with this virus that is circulating? And then that was brand new and not really sure how to deal with it. And then there was this other very old, very familiar virus of racial injustice that kind of reared up in a really powerful way. And so the collision of those two things was really showing up in a lot of our day-to-day behaviors and in our media habits. I think one of the most powerful and sobering stats on how that all came together for me personally was we looked at the week of the Capitol insurrection. And Nielsen's data showed that not only were, Black families sort of tuned into the news the day that happened, but specifically Black children were 4 out of 10 of their most viewed programs that week were news programs, compared to just 1 out of 10 for kids overall. And so for that to surface through our data really just kind of gave us all pause to say, after watching a summer of how protesters asking for equality and, demanding justice and a change in tide were treated in those scenarios, and then seeing sort of a stark contrast as to how the Capitol insurrection played out, and then seeing the data about how kids tuned into that was really powerful to say that, children are, more than ever, like really tuned in, and Black children in particular, have to confront these issues, and television content is a big part of how that conversation plays out in our households. I think, through this, it wasn't all sort of as heavy as that. TV is the great escape still for many of us. And so there's definitely these moments of joy and triumph and connection. And so we were able to highlight how, holiday movies like, I can't think of the name, the Christmas Chronicles.
I was gonna say Jingle Jangle. That was
Jingle
like
Jangle.
one.
Yes, that's the one. It was Jingle Jangled in my brain. And Soul all kind of surfaced up to the top as like those good family, let me just sit down and have a nice sort of age appropriate interaction around the television. And then beyond that, for the grownups in the room, we really saw some trends that surfaced through the versus phenomenon in club quarantine. So, engagement with Instagram and with Zoom all up exponentially with Black adults. And so those were those moments of joy where we say, the screen time wasn't all as heavy as the news cycle. There was definitely some escape and ways to cope with that as well. And so that was really sort of the goal here, was just to highlight how it really was showing up in our media behaviors, fighting these two very real battles.
So I'm going to bring Natalie into the conversation now, because you're really responsible for some of the key things that young people watch, right? You said like the 2 to 8 year, and I was wondering if that goes into like some of the thoughts that some of the reporting, the data from Nielsen influences programming for the program that's developed.
Yeah, absolutely. Nielsen really helps influence a lot of our understanding of our audience. It's through Nielsen data that we know that PBS reaches more Black children, more Hispanic children, more Asian American children, and Native American children in this country than any other network does in a year. So we definitely very much rely on Nielsen data to kind of help us understand who's watching. And that in turn, of course, really plays into our mission of wanting to make sure that every child living in America can see themselves reflected on our screen. So it's through reporting from Nielsen and other data inputs that we have that we really understand that this is not just critical to our mission, but really critical to the growth and the development of children across the country. And so we very much pay attention to that.
I was just going to say, to just follow up what Natalie pointed out there with like the need to really make sure that children in particular are seen on screen and have their experience reflected back to them. Some other recent research from Nielsen and our team found that over half of Black audiences felt there's still not enough of content that is representative of their identity. And of their experiences. And so the work that, PBS Kids and others are doing is really critical. And the demand is there for pushing that even further, because we usually get that one show or that one movie, and families are saying, and Black audiences in general are saying that we need more. There's still not enough. So great kudos to the work that's going on there.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for that. And I think, I'd read a report from Nielsen, maybe it's the same one that you're referencing, Seeing and Believing. Is that right? I felt like that, that also did a, phenomenal job, I think, of just underscoring that it's not just quantity even that matters. It's that quality, that authentic approach, that authentic representation. And that is, that's very much what we're, in constant pursuit of doing more of, and really making sure, again, that, when kids are watching, it's not just a surface level thing. They're really seeing themselves. They're really seeing their stories. They're really seeing their, their day-to-day challenges and, positive solutions that can come of them.
For sure. You'll see that theme recurring a lot, I think, today and going forward in the work coming from Nielsen, because it's a reality that, as a Black woman in corporate America and a mom, that, we live constantly, but making sure that quality and context piece is present. It goes even beyond our scripted content, right? So especially going back to like what we were seeing play out last summer, if constantly that news cycle or what we're seeing play out in breaking news doesn't have the context behind why, those dots can't get connected for audiences, and you're presented with just that very surface level, one perspective. And so one of the great things that I think that has come out of 2020, and I hope persists, is a lot more context in reporting. You saw programs like 13th and giving like historical context around like, how did we get here? How did we get to now, to reference a PBS title? But I think the inclusion, I think, in the broadening of the context and the people who get to report and add on that has really shifted dramatically in the last almost 2 years. And I hope we continue to see more of that.
I think what's nice too is, some of the programming that PBS developed over the last year. I think it's been a continuum of, some of the like Sesame Street, right? I know Sesame Street is Sesame Street Workshop, right, which is on PBS. But again, programs like that, Arthur, right?
Daniel Taggart,
right? Talking about race, talking about having those conversations, right? And that to me really became important, going back to Charlene's point about the context, right? And making it understandable for kids. And I just wanted to, I guess, I know from you, Natalie, about how PBS, created that and responded to that. I mean, I think that was wonderful. To me, I think that really does show how responsive you all are, but also intentional as well, because it's been a history of it. But it's just interesting to hear kind of like the behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so you're right that I think the need to be responsive, the need to be really honest and direct with kids about what's going on in the world is something that, has characterized PBS Kids content since the days of Mr. Rogers, talking about Robert Kennedy being assassinated and other events. And of course, Sesame Workshop has done a phenomenal job of really, talking to these tough issues. This last year and a half, 2 years, however long it's been now, have really been, I think, both some of the most challenging and also, I think, some of the most exciting years for me as somebody who, really believes that media can make an impact and really can help foster conversations, can help kids make sense of the world around them in a really powerful way. So we really, applied that thinking into these, twin crises of the last couple of years. In terms of race and racism, I mean, this was really our response. We really felt like, we had the capacity to help kids and parents figure out how to talk about these issues together. And we knew that, parents were really looking to us as a really trusted source of media, as, media entity that, always kind of puts an age-appropriate approach first and foremost. So we were hearing from parents through social media, through, other channels that they really needed help, that they really wanted support in this. And so we really took that to heart. And that's really, was why my team and I developed PBS Kids Talk About Race and Racism, which was a broadcast special that was developed kind of as a continuation of a digital series that we have, PBS Kids Talk About. And this, what we hoped to do there was, really model for parents and for children that this is something that needs to be discussed, and that there are lots of ways that can look like. There's not a perfect way to do it. Some people, are have been talking about these issues, especially among families of color, for many years, before viewing this program. And for some families, it was brand new and it was uncomfortable and it was scary. And we really wanted to show that that's okay. All of it is okay. The important thing is to talk about it. And so we were very fortunate to be able to work with Amanda Gorman on, hosting this special. We were really fortunate to have wonderful production partners who helped us, pull the appropriate clips from series like Daniel Tiger, Xavier Riddle and the Secret Museum, and Arthur, that kind of showed different ways that, race and standing up for what's right really can play out. And then we were extremely fortunate just to have such a wonderful array of families join us in these very open and very honest conversations on camera, so that, families across the country could really benefit from seeing that modeled and seeing how, it's not perfect and it's hard, but it's okay and it's good, and it moves things along. So that was very important to us.
Yeah, I think what is really powerful about the programming Natalie's talking about is, definitely a critical sort of guidepost for those families having the conversation for the first time, who are finally like, what, this is the right age. This is the right time to talk to you about this reality. And I think in many Black households, that is sort of a generational passed on conversation that, that it's coming, you're going to have to address it. And probably address it very early on. But one thing that one trend I would say as a parent, a millennial parent, if you will, is that we don't always have to follow the rule book of, that generational handbook, so to speak. And so that when we have these new resources about, maybe there's a better way to make it make sense for a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old at the time, that those resources are still valuable, even if you have had to have this conversation before. If you, even expect to have this conversation often, that for both those those who unfortunately have had to revisit this topic or having it for the first time, there's so much intention behind this kind of programming that Natalie and the PBS Kids team are putting together, and that's valuable.
So sometimes, I'm a pediatrician. And so a lot of it, I come from the perspective, one is a mom, but also as a pediatrician. And I think for me, given these past couple years, the American Academy of Pediatrics, has put out statements about, limiting how much television time. And then we also say, in response to like really traumatic events, right? Making sure that, we kind of monitor how much exposure kids have to the information. But it is balanced with the fact that given the last couple years, given, technology, but also given the fact that there is more representative and positive content for younger kids, right? Especially younger kids. And I'm hoping, more gets developed for older kids as well, right? So it's this full spectrum of kids. And so what I really do appreciate about, having this information about, how people are viewing and what they want, juxtaposed to what's available, right? As a pediatrician, right? I now have tools, right, to share with parents. Educators have tools to share with parents. So I think we can sort of balance both of those things, right? And I think also too, going back to what PBS Kids does in terms of that intention, what I think is intentional is the normalization, right, of the conversations, because you've already kind of established that even with Daniel the Tiger talking about emotions, right, that's already sort of normalized, and to then start having something else added to the conversation also normalize it, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we definitely pay close attention to those recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And at the same time, I think, as you were saying, Jackie, I think we really look at media as a resource, media as a tool for families, for kids, and for families and for caregivers and kids at the same time. We've done studies that show that when there's, kind of an adult that engages in a media experience with their child takes away a lot more from that media than they would have if they're just watching on their own. So I think we really look at these as opportunities to say, here is something that you can talk about together. Here's something that you can build on, build a relationship around, I've seen that with my own son. One of the silver linings, I think, of the pandemic is that we spent a lot of time watching content together. And it gave us a lot to talk about, and it gave us a lot to take out into the world and connect to what he's seeing in the world in ways that, I think it may have been more challenging without that opportunity. So I think, that's a very small scale example of what we're hoping content like PBS Kids Race and Racism can do on a larger scale, with more impact across the country.
I agree, Natalie. We, in my household, we blew past that recommendation for screen time limits pretty quickly, and still are. But I think that part of how that's justified in my head is like, there are resources. There's definitely, especially as taking a part in watching as a family, or, just being the grown-up in the room as he engages with content, that I know if I steer him to certain outlets in certain programs, he is getting the benefit of that early childhood development, or just, to your point, Jackie, of normalizing seeing Black and brown characters, kinky hair, and, the full sort of spectrum of, what Black experience or Afro-Latino experience can and can be. And so for me, it's really exciting to see that with so many different content options now versus how, someone my age grew up, it won't be, shocking to see or surprising to see that representation. It would be more shocking if he comes into a program and it's like, why aren't there any characters that look like me? It'll just be a part of his expectation and something still celebrated, but not like a surprise, when he goes in and sees himself reflected. And so that is really important in the content of the programming we choose.
Just going back to one of your original points, Charlene, about how families think that there's not enough. There could be more, right? More representation, and just thinking about that intentionality of programs that are developed, right? And even for little kids, right? Again, we talk about this normalization of interactions between different groups of people. Unfortunately, in the United States, there are some communities that may not have interactions with someone that doesn't look like them. So then the programming becomes, I think, an opportunity, like you said, like this Eugene Sims Bishop's mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors opportunity. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and how maybe some thoughts about how maybe media can be more intentional about that, right? So, and how PBS maybe does that as well, Natalie, as maybe as a follow-up to that response from Shirley.
Sure. Yeah, I think it goes back to, when we talk about other audiences who may not ever cross paths with a certain type of person in real life, but get exposed to that experience or to that type of person through content, it makes that point about quality and context all the more critical. Even though, hey, we've got these players sort of represented on screen and that quantity of representation is great, if we're not also considering how we always present, is the dark character always the villain? Who does the hero look like? Who gets to have, the 2-parent household? All those different sort of subconscious, subliminal, different aspects of a character or of how a story is represented are really, really important. So does the person living with a disability get to win the race or achieve, the award or whatever that is? Just normalizing those types of dimensions of diversity can be really, really powerful when we aren't even looking for it or expecting it. But again, if you've never crossed paths, even with, a person of a different race or background, religion, content has such a huge opportunity to connect those dots for us. And if we think about, just overall, children are spending so much time with television. I think it's around 22 hours a week on average for kids 2 to 11. That is a big window into how we learn and to how we build perceptions. Some additional research that our team did showed that, people of color were more likely to say that how they were represented on screen was inaccurate. But when they were thinking about how other identity groups are represented, they were saying, yeah, that's mostly correct. So if we think about, if you ask me how I'm represented on screen, I'm saying it's inaccurate. But if you ask Natalie how Black women are represented on screen, she might answer that. I think that that's pretty accurate. And so that disconnect, I think, says a lot about how we do have to have that intention in the room. We have to have those diverse perspectives in the room who are thinking about not just on the surface how someone gets represented, but how we can dive deeper and represent our own intersectional realities, positive, negative, and otherwise, when we have the opportunity to tell a story.
Yeah, Charlene is absolutely right. And at the same time, I also would just add to that, I think one of the things that we think a lot about is that, when there's only one show that is, maybe about, a Native American community, or there's only one show about a Black family on any given network, then it puts so much pressure on that one particular program to be representative of an entire broad, diverse, rich, complicated,
right,
in the best possible way, right, community. And so I think it really speaks to, there's no one size fits all approach. And that's something that is really top of mind for us as we, look across our development slate, as we look across kind of what's out there already. It's not like we're done, right? Molly of Denali, I think, is a phenomenal show that, it's the first show with a lead Native American character that's, broadly distributed in the United States. That's amazing, but our work isn't done, right? Alma's Way tells the story of a Puerto Rican family living in the Bronx, and that's a really specific and really richly diverse and interesting community to be looking at. But We also have a show that was just announced in production called Rosie's Rules. That's going to be looking at a blended Mexican-American family in Texas, right? It's not like there's, we have a show about Latino characters and we're done. There's more to tell. There's more to unpack. There's more to explore and capture with a lot of people who are bringing their voices to these experiences, both on the screen and behind the scenes, and that's really what we're looking to do more of, just to build on, some of the content that I think that we've done that has been really important and meaningful, and also to recognize that we're never done because there's so much more to do, and there's so many ways to look at identity as it plays out across the United States.
I'm so excited to hear about that content that's coming because, again, getting really specific and detailed and granular about an experience is phenomenal for the people that it connects with. And because of that, it's also, that education around somebody I may not cross paths with or know personally. But the powerful thing about what you just said is, we have Puerto Rico, we have Mexico, and all these different Hispanic, Latino experiences being represented in the programming. But also, one of the things we called out in the families report was, Afro-Latino families make up around, or households make up almost 5% of our Black population. And so by nature, by very definition, this is an intersectional story that is going to be told. There's Black people in all those places you mentioned. So the more that we can dive deeper into a community, all those other beautiful aspects emerge. Yeah. But yeah, that pressure of just having the one show, we've got to get past that because that, we can't, that I think takes that risk and burden of being everything to everyone away, because there's not just going to be one story. We're going to have more to be able to really dive in and tell those stories the way that they deserve to be. And by nature, that will bring more of us along, I feel. So really exciting to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, and just to your point, Charlene, even in Alma's Way, which, as I said, Alma's, Puerto Rican, it's about a Puerto Rican family. So there's nuance and there's difference and there's diversity even within sort of like, what we tend to sort of generalize as, one experience, and really thinking about that. And again, I think it goes back to intentionality, right? That's an intentional choice to be reflective of more than one label, for lack of a better term, and to explore that and to celebrate it and to have fun with it. I think that's really what, I think that's where it gets the most interesting, right? That's where the fun is for me. And I think for the folks that we work with, it's exciting because it's real and it's lovely.
I think for me, what I'm looking forward to is hearing, the kids in this generation, younger kids as they're growing up, what how their views of what they've seen and heard and their experiences will differ from like the prior generation. And I think, part of that is really going to be influenced by parents' choices, right? With their children. And I think hopefully not only does the media that's becoming more representative and diverse and inclusive, focus on children, right? Okay, there's kids can see themselves, but also, the parents and caregivers for those children, it becomes normal for them too, right? Because I think, in my experience, right, parents do struggle, and in your research, right, they struggle in asking questions, talking about different topics, having hard conversations because of their experiences, right? And there's this sort of dissonance between their kids' experiences right now and what they may have been what their parents may have grown up with. So I think that's going to be interesting.
That's a great point you bring up, Jackie, about not just the parents, but the caregivers and other grown-ups sort of, really shepherding this next generation. The census data that we looked at showed that 51% of Black kids are in a one-parent household. So just thinking about, the realities of making it day to day, hour to hour in the last 2 years, what that has been like for a parent, kind of doing it by themselves or with their village. Another 7% lived with relatives other than a parent. And some, our report on women over 50 also showed that, basically women of color were more likely to have children in the household. So, and I think Black women over 50 in particular were 22% more likely to have children in the household. So when we're talking to, the folks who are, raising this next generation, it's not always young, married couples that are in the household, and they need support as well, because we would not survive without my in-laws. But, there's all kinds of different ways to make a family. And if you talk about sort of that generational divide of how maybe a grandparent and the issues that they had to deal, or the resources they had to deal when they raised their own kids or when they were coming up, compared to now what they are faced with, is really dramatic. And that is a large part of the populations when we start to look at the Black community. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's an important consideration that shows up and it does show up in some of the kids' content that's out there. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and I would just add that for for PBS kids, I think, so, my work really focuses on developing that content and that programming for kids between the ages of 2 and 8. But within the broader context of the work that kind of comes out of our group, we really see our work as, if we're thinking about a child's success, it has to recognize that that involves caregivers, that involves adults, that involves teachers, that involves a whole community. And so, we have people on our team who are working on resources for parents to kind of help build on, the content that's available to their children. We have teams who are really working on connecting educators with our content so that things can be talked about in the classroom. They say it takes a village. We call it like an ecosystem, right? It's all of the people in a child's life who are invested in their success. And so how can we be helpful, broadly to all of those influential folks in a child's life? And how can we be providing them with support and resources and helping answer questions when they reach out to us? How can you help me talk to my children about the pandemic? How can you help me talk to children about race and racism? We are all in this together, and we're really committed to figuring out how we can be a trusted resource for all.
I'm looking forward to, you are really being the trying to find the right word, right? Sort of the model, right, for other, and I think that's slowly developing by maybe even some of the more commercial brands, right? Putting content out for kids. And I'm hearing more of them being intentional about what's put out. Because I know what my kids are 20 and 23, or one will be 20 coming up, like 2023. And I'm like, all right, that content was different than what they have access, what younger kids have access to now. So I think what I would have told a parent, or what I would have been told, I would have told myself as a parent when they were younger, I might have different ideas now about what I would say, to myself as a parent now if I had younger kids, because I think there's still not enough, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that there's been progress made, and progress takes a long time, right, to achieve.
Yeah.
But I think so, but at least I think we're headed in the right direction. Fingers crossed.
Right. I would say one of my sort of personal guideposts as a mom and searching for content, I know that anything he watches on PBS will be educational. But what I do like to see is other networks or content that we might watch. It's usually an app. So like if he's on Nick Jr. or something like that, before they'll say, these are the skills that, we're working on if you watch this program. And so PBS might have that now, but I know that no matter what it is, there are skills that are safe. I don't have to think about it. It's a safe place for him to be. I don't have to worry about an ad that's going to pop up and not be appropriate, or something that, is really for grownups and not necessarily for you. And then with others are kind of giving parents that sort of disclaimer going in to say, yes, there's something here that he will take away from it. It's not just like one big ad, which is a couple of the cartoons when I was growing up. It was just all advertising the doll you needed to buy. So I do like looking for those sort of hints of this is a good place for your family to be. And I think we're seeing more of that. And so definitely the sources where I can, blanket trust of this is always going to be high quality and safe and he'll learn something are always beneficial.
And then one last question, now with, more technology available to kids, right? The apps, like you mentioned, as well as podcasts or, other electronics. Charlene, are you hearing about parents, like Black parents engaging in those resources? And then I guess, Natalie, for you, how PBS is navigating some of the use of technology?
Yeah, I would just start by saying that the use of technology has really exploded. It's been a trend, especially among children, the last, several years. But then with the change in the pandemic, and now I'm not just going there for entertainment, after school or on weekends. It is, I'm in front of the laptop for school. I'm on my tablet while mom's in a meeting. Like, it is just nonstop. And we've seen that really explode in the data, particularly for kids and connected devices. So those internet connected devices to the main television set, where kids overall are spending around 18 hours a week with television, but 9 hours of that, and this is the 2 to 11 age group, but about 9 hours of that time a week is just with the streaming devices, just with the connected devices. With Black children, 2 to 11 in particular, that goes up to over 11 and a half hours a week. So we're seeing more than half of that time with the TV screen being with basically a gateway device to all this other, resources of content, which is, can be both good and bad. But I do think that families are really, really leaning into, especially when you think about last year when production kind of stopped as we kind of figured out how to operate in the new world. The streaming libraries were a huge resource when new programming wasn't coming out. And because that sort of behavior was built, and we see this across the board for every age group, now that sort of pathway has been built, and it's going to be really hard to shut it off. But what I don't think families are thinking about enough is, again, those sort of safe places for kids' entertainment. There's a lot of stuff on the internet that is presented as kids' content. And I don't think there's enough information for, just your average family trying to survive about what is truly and really appropriate for your kids and what is not so safe and flat out targeting, because it's really easy to fall down that rabbit hole. So it just really underscores the importance of folks who are, programming with intention, like Natalie and others who have those environments that are really appropriate, especially for young children, because I think parents, just for, for whatever reason and just in desperation, have been like, I just need you to be right here so I can function and you can function and do the things and we'll get through the day. And there's not been a lot of thought, but I think that's a huge opportunity for us now going forward, is to say, what are those guardrails you need to consider if you are tapping into that content, especially for young kids and even older kids, even grownups. But I don't think we put a lot of thought into sort of those corners of the internet where we did sort of seek out content. And that's going to be increasingly important now that these pathways have been connected for a lot of families.
Yeah, there are resources that, really try to kind of sort of pre-screen or, make recommendations. Common Sense Media is a pretty influential one, but I think you're right, Charlene. It's just, it's a little bit of the Wild West in some ways, just because just I am one of those parents you described who, is like, just to get through. I had when the pandemic started, my oldest was 3.5 and I had a 4-month-old baby, and it was just, we did what we had to do. But it was, one of the things that really struck me was how quickly my son figured out how to navigate the tablet beyond what I sort of put in front of him. And that was very terrifying,
Oh, terrifying.
Yeah.
He bought a couple of movies without permission.
Yeah. My son is, he like knows just enough spelling to trigger the predictive text to Google things, and, stuff comes up when I'm not watching, that I'm like, oh, I wish I had known that, so we're kind of in this new phase for parents of, yeah, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. How do you, navigate these issues, and where can you kind of pivot and redirect and sort of stay within the area that your kids are interested in a safe environment. And of course that's, as a person who works for PBS Kids, I always sort of try to steer back there. But yeah, I do think it's a challenge for the whole industry. There's a lot more awareness, I think, from parents of just how quickly, kids can kind of, take matters into their own hands, and also just that need for, like, how do you redirect? How do you, put those safety rails on while they're, still at such a tender age? It is a very rich and interesting topic to figure out.
I agree. And I know the American Academy of Pediatrics has some resources, and I know Common Sense Media is definitely a resource that we recommend to families. So I'll definitely share the resources I have, and things that were mentioned during our conversation today, for listeners to help as well, because I think it's important. Because I think the couple of things I've heard, and this is also a good learning experience, right, for me as a pediatrician as well. It's like the reality of parents today, right? So navigating media, but also again as a tool and a resource, right? And parents should be should give themselves some slack, cut themselves some slack, right? Because you do the best that you can with the situations that you have, right? And I think as long as parents, their intention is really to do their best for their kids, right? That's all you can do, right? That's all you can do. And I think if anyone hasn't told you, amazing moms, right? Or the things that you're doing, and really, it's talking about multitasking. This is beyond, right? With the pandemic, it's a lot of stuff parents have to deal with. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing to help other families, and really move. I think becoming like a great model and opportunity for what can be done better for all kids. I know we're focusing, my podcast focuses particularly on Black families and children, but I really think it's content for everyone. And I thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today. I look forward to, all the great program PBS puts out, as well as more information from Nielsen.
Thank you so much, Jackie. This is really a very fun and enlightening conversation, I think. And I'm really appreciative that you included me as a guest today.
Same here. I really appreciate the time. Thank you both for the work you're doing as well. And thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. Music and editing for this episode by Manny Simone. We want to grow our community, so please tell a friend about the podcast and let them know that they can subscribe to the podcast wherever they listen to podcasts. Check out our website at whatisblack.co to learn about our work and to sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date about our exciting projects, like our upcoming documentary, Reading in Black, celebrating Black children's literature. Until next time, wishing you peace, wellness, and joy, and a reminder that you're seen and matter.